What is up, Coordination? On the pod today, we have Griff Green, who is the founder of CommonStack, founder of Giveth, and Token Engineering Commons. We are talking on this episode about Pairwise, which is a new voting user interface that basically makes voting a little bit simpler and a little bit easier on the users to make complex decisions. It's kind of ranked choice voting in a Tinder-style user experience is I think a reductionist way to describe it. And why is that powerful? If we make voting easier for people, then they'll vote on more stuff, and then we get better collective resource allocation, we get better funding of public goods, which makes people believe in digital democracy more. So Griff is one of my favorite builders to talk to in the space, just because he's so prolific, goes wide, has been doing a lot of stuff with a lot of different DAOs, but he also goes deep with some of the builders in his network on building new stuff that pushes the state of coordination forward. And so I'd say the first half of this episode is talking about Pairwise and why that's a powerful new way of doing coordination and voting in the space. And then the second half of the episode, we get weird and talk about Griff's philosophy on how we could fund public goods with crypto, both locally and at a global level, create change with crypto economic systems. It's a lot of fun to chat about those themes with Griff, and I think you're going to enjoy this episode, Coordination.
ATHENA DAO is addressing the underfunded areas of women's health, such as menopause and endometriosis. ATHENA is a community-driven DAO, giving women a say in decision-making and funding the scientific breakthroughs that impact their lives. With cutting-edge technology like Molecule's IP NFT framework, they invest in research IP that ensures exclusive licensing rights. ATHENA DAO is raising awareness to women's health research, working alongside existing organizations. So join ATHENA DAO today to help change the landscape of women's health research.
What's up, Griff? How you doing?
Living the dream, man. How are you?
I'm pretty good. The last episode that we did together was so much fun. The 50 to 100 different coordination mechanisms. So I'm excited to jam again. That was like 6 months ago. So what's new on your side?
On my side, it's just the same old, just pushing out every, public goods project that we can dream of over in the Giveth galaxy. I'm excited that we're talking about Pairwise today, because honestly, it's one of my favorite projects, but it's still very alpha, beta, so it's not really it's active development, but it's not like being used. So it never gets the play that it deserves. But, there's a praise and CommonStack and all the crazy stuff that we do in Giveth. And now we have the Giveth Galaxy just did this AI hackathon where everyone took a day off to just build something with AI. And I'm talking like devs to admins, and there were bounties for different use cases. So just diving into the AI world is blowing my mind,
Well, yeah, I feel like you're like me in that you like to spin multiple plates at the same time. So if you're watching on video, you see that Griff's wearing a CommonStack t-shirt, but he's also the founder of Giveth. And then General Magic is sort of your regen contracting firm that you work out of. There's probably one or two orgs that you fly the banner of that I'm missing there too.
Yeah, I founded Dappnode back in the day. And then Praise is probably the other big one. And actually Bright ID, I'm an advisor there. And then of course, a delegate for Gicoin and Optimism and Arbitrum and ENS. Basically anything in the public goods realm is like, I'll be there if I can.
I was tweeting the other day about how some of the best DAO contributors I know are T-shaped. So basically like you go broad and you have cultural interop with many different projects, and then you go deep on one specific thing. And I think that I think of you as like a very T-shaped person in the ecosystem, and that you're sort of cross-pollinating across all these different projects. And there's alpha to be had there by just like sensing and responding to what's going on in the ecosystem for sure. But it takes a lot of time as well, I'm sure.
Yeah. I don't know how you do so much, man. I don't have kids, that makes my life a lot easier. But being a dad and doing all this. Oh.
Yeah, totally. Geez, let's go deep then. We could go lots broad, but let's go deep, and then we'll come back to the broad stuff. So Pairwise, tell me why, what, and how is Pairwise, and why are you excited about it?
Pairwise is voting with good UX. That's the long and short of it. And voting in DAOs right now is just so painful. It's so painful. It's like, read all these forum posts, try to get context. Oh, and by the way, engage with the forum posts with that context and defend your opinions against everyone else. And who's going to push back. And if you have a disagreement, oh, and by the way, we're going to vote in public. I mean, there's so many issues. And I'm not going to pretend that Pairwise solves any of them, but, all of them, I mean, but it's really trying to target the hardest piece, which I think is user experience. Most votes, because they require so much context, it's like you have a lot of things to understand and connect together. And then you have to make one simple but huge decision. And Pairwise flips that around. We say, hey, make lots of small decisions, and that will aggregate into an understanding of the big decision, right? And that's what I want to do with voting in general in DAOs is like, can we just make voting more like signal aggregation? Make it really easy for community members, big or small, and make it easy and fun for community members, big or small, to come in and just share their opinions, share their thoughts. Pairwise is kind of a first attempt at that, and there's going to be more, I promise. And I hope they don't all come from me. I hope they come from everybody, because we got to make it easier for us to gauge the interest of the community. And just wouldn't it be great if we could just automate like taking those signals and direct the community in that direction. What Pairwise is really best at is kind of we call it ranked choice voting. It's like, okay, what is your favorite project? What is your second favorite? What is your third favorite? What is your fourth favorite? It can be project, it can be parameters, it can be NFTs, whatever, right? It's kind of this curation. Instead of saying, okay, take the big list and then order them. Like I was a steward were you a steward for retroactive public goods funding?
I was a badge holder in round 2, yeah.
And so we had to go through and put all of these percentages in an Excel spreadsheet for 195 projects. And it was hard. It was really, really difficult. And with Pairwise, that would look so different. It would just be like, here's 2 projects. Which one deserves more retroactive public goods funding? Next two. And you're just making lots of small decisions. And then we have an algorithm that can be configured by one person who's really smart and wants to manage it, right? That will give out some results. And when you see those results, this feature doesn't exist yet, but you should be able to switch them if they're not right. The cool thing here is it's iterative. You can make lots of small decisions. You can be, just sitting on the toilet, basically like picking your favorite projects for 5 minutes, and then or 10 if you're having issues, and then move on and go back and forth.
Did a little bit of research before this, and it looks like you can check out Pairwise at pairwise.generalmagic.io. And the primary innovation is a voting user experience where you just kind of decide the left project or the right project, and then do that a bunch of times, and then you eventually get to rank all the different projects in the registry, kind of like ranked choice voting style. But one of the things that I really like is that people can only have to have a couple different things in their head at a time, or as opposed to, like you said, with a retroactive public goods experiment where we all had to decide which of 150 different projects deserve the retroactive rewards. If that had been done with Pairwise, then it would just be very easy to look at tuples, which basically means pairs of 2 projects at a time, and maybe do that 15 or 20 times, and you get a ranked list of the whole registry. Is that close?
Yeah, I mean, you might have to do it for 195 projects. You might have to do it a lot to get the whole registry. It's kind of one of these things where if we train the algorithm right, you can kind of go back and forth. Maybe there's some projects that you want to just be like, I love these 10 projects. So you kind of seed them with some initial percentages. But then there's also the project discovery process. You get 2 projects and you're like, well, I like this one. What is that one? You click it and you're like, oh yeah, it's that thing. Yeah, I definitely like this one better, and it's just like so much more digestible. And then when this project comes up against a project you don't like, you're like, oh, well, this one for sure. And then you just get all these choices, and we can train an algorithm basically to decide a percentage of allocation across the span. You just need one person who is configuring it like a snapshot vote. You need someone to make the snapshot strategy. And same with this one, you kind of need someone to decide like, where do you draw the lines and what's the default experience? If you get 2 projects and you don't know either of them, you hit abstain. So there will be some configuration. And I assume that once we have this out, we'll make like default patterns for people. Like for retroactive public goods funding, if you hit abstain, they should get 0 percentages, but maybe for other use cases, you might want that. I really like Pairwise because it's a very clear pattern. It's almost like Tinder UX, but for solving a complex thing, just like Tinder does, where it's like, well, who's going to be your mate? Or your date. And then, you make lots of micro decisions.
Well, I think those micro decisions are powerful in their simplicity. Tinder invited that whole swipe right, swipe left experience. And I'm actually probably one of the only people in the world that knows this because I used to run an online dating website in my 20s, not because I actually used Tinder. But what's really beautiful about what they've done is that the user experience of swiping left or swiping right is very simple. But then under the hood, you can run some really powerful algorithms around that. There's this thing called collaborative filtering. And it basically is a way of saying, okay, if you swiped 6 times, then basically we can use clustering to know that you're like these other users, and these other users like these other products or like these other whatever. And you can use inference to sort of map preferences. And it's very nice for the users because you don't have to go to continue the online dating example. You could say like, hey, I'm a 38-year-old man looking for women within 5 years of age of myself within Boulder, Colorado. And there's just like a bunch of like things you have to tune in order to search and like think about to set those preferences in like a traditional search view. But with Pairwise, you just swipe and then the algorithm learns your preferences from there. And I think that that's a really powerful paradigm that I learned back in like running the dating site. And it would just make total sense to apply it to a marketplace for public goods as well. And so I'm excited to hear about the algorithms under the hood that you're using to turn that data into something useful.
Yeah, it's actually the big brains of Colony. They're like a DAO project that has been around for a long time, since early days of Ethereum. And the PhD algo design people actually wrote a paper in 2018 about how you would do this kind of pairwise assessment and then turn it into a budgeting process. It was originally called Budget Box, and actually in our first call about coordinations, we called it Budget Box. Since then, we branded it to Pairwise, mostly because it's about, I think it has a lot of general use case beyond budgeting, well beyond budgeting. Like it can be winner takes all, just the top choice wins. It can be, an ordered list, doesn't have to have weights, or it can have weights, and all of those outputs are very simple out of the box with what we have. But I'm really excited to go deep with the algo. We don't have anything on the roadmap about bringing in clustering yet, because we really need a first user, and I'm hoping retroactive public goods funding can be that first user that we can design for. And then we have a user that we can test our algorithms choices against. That's when it becomes like, for sure. And I do think clustering makes a lot of sense, because that will, if you just have a few active users that are really going deep on these things, and you can map them to choices that other people are making along the same lines. Yeah, I think you will end up with some very easy clustering, low-hanging fruit to make a better user experience. Honestly, I'm not the algo designer. I get to hang out with all these geniuses that, get to play games. And then I'm just like, oh, that's cool. Yeah, let's do that. My main thing is we got to make it easier for people to signal, and algorithms will do that.
Well, I think that one of the huge opportunity spaces that I see with Web3 is making democracy and collective decision-making much more high resolution. So we're all sort of coming up in these industrialized democracies where you vote once every 2 years if you're very involved, or once every 4 years for president and for state level voting. And of course, there's opportunities to be more civically engaged in between those things. But what if the data emissions that we're releasing when we fund Gicoin grants, or we do Pairwise, or even our social networks can be used in a way to create a more high resolution picture of what the actual citizens actually care about? And I feel like there's a lot of opportunities to really optimize ecosystems around our values and do it in a decentralized, democratic way by reinventing these voting interfaces. So I welcome the innovation, and I'm excited about it. Is there more to say about Pairwise, or should we kind of zoom out and talk about all possible voting systems at this point?
Yeah, I think zooming out is good. I love Pairwise, but it's still early days. We've only put 10K of funding into it. Like, which is really not enough. I mean, it was enough to get our first like hackathon style prototype out there, but I'm excited for first users. So, call to action or, shameless plug. If you think that this app is cool and want to play with it, let's talk and let's get you playing with it and tell us where it needs feedback and how we can make it use your use case.
Check out pairwise.generalmagic.io, or we'll have a link to your Twitter user in the show notes so people can click on that in order to get in touch. I'm curious how the first experiments went. I see at pairwise.generalmagic.io that there's a Giveth node, there's ENS donations, there's Common Stack, and then there's a couple other projects there. So how did that 10K distribution go? Was that in the Giveth space that you all did that?
The 10K distribution was solely for development. We didn't actually use Pairwise to distribute. But the actually for Giveth, this is my own internal use case. One of the things that we have in Giveth is called Give Power. And it's a way of curating projects based on Give tokens staked. It's kind of like VE curve for public goods in the regen space. But, it's very plutocratic. And that's not really very regen. And so we were thinking it would be great if project owners themselves had a way to signal on the projects and give that weight for our ranking system to decide which projects should come up first on the web page and get more views on Giveth, right? And so we were thinking, hey, we have this verification system. It's very good at one person, one vote kind of a thing. We could actually make a project centered, like I think Big Green DAO, like Elon Musk, right? Their governance system is really focused on the projects curating each other and saying which projects should receive funding in their DAO. And I love that. And so we were thinking, well, we could kind of marry Give Power, which is plutocratic based off of off the Give token. And then we could also say verified projects also have a weight. And how do the verified projects signal though? They can't really use Give Power. It doesn't make sense, So we were thinking, well, let's make it really easy for these. How do we make it easy for nonprofit, founders that have a little bit of crypto interest and curiosity to go in and actually vote on projects? And so Pairwise was the solution for that. And then, of course, we saw it as something that could scale. And so we've been working with it with our community group to get it ready and people have been testing it and they love it. It's been very successful. And same with retroactive public goods funding for Optimism. That's another beta test. We've showed it to several badge holders in several groups and they love it too. No one's told me that it sucks. So that's a good sign.
Well, that's really neat. I mean, I'd be curious. I just had Amin Soleimani on the podcast like 10 episodes ago. And I feel like one of the things that I see in him is that, so for the listeners who don't know, Amin founded Moloch DAO and Spank Chain and Rye and now Privacy Pools. And for me, it's like the same sort of profile that I see in you, where you're just like very good at getting coordination games from 0 to 1 and doing it sort of on not a lot of resources and very quickly and rapidly prototyping. So I'll ask you the same question that I asked Amin, which is like, what's your secret? How do you get all these experiments off the ground and sort of cultivate them to a point where they're mature? Because it seems like the amount that you're shipping is really high. I mean, Giveth has a bunch of different mechanisms, and I consider myself a mechanism nerd, and I can't even keep track of all the mechanisms Giveth is shipping. So what's your secret with getting all these coordination games from 0 to 1?
Delegation, for sure. At least that, like, I don't do this stuff, man. I don't do anything as far as I can tell. I find leaders who are excited about the project and trust them to take it to the next level and make sure that there's communication around what resources they need so that we can get there. There's a lot of failed projects too. I've had so many fails, and I wouldn't say I'm great at failing fast. Maybe persistence is another piece. Giveth probably should have died many times over. Like it's been a battle, and it rose out of the ashes of the DAO, which was my first huge fail, and there's been lots of fails since then. The common stack, like Giveth almost died and just became the common stack. It's like every bear market, it's like Giveth almost dies. This is going to be the first bear market where Giveth doesn't almost die, as since 2016. So I would say persistence and delegation.
Well, I also think that there's a third thing, and that's I know this from hanging out with you, but you're just genuinely interested in the frontier of what's possible in coordination. And I think that goes back to what we started the episode on, which is just being involved in a dozen different projects and knowing what's current for all of them gives you a sense of the topology of what's going on in the space. So not to answer my own question for me, but that's another thing that I sort of see between you and Amin and anyone else who's really good at that stuff is knowing where to invest resources, because you're synthesizing information from multiple places.
Yeah, and maybe I'll add one more thing that connects Amin in a way, is like a true passion for change. Like I think Amin, his background, he's from Iran, and there's a lot of, or he has an Iranian background, I should say. And he has, a lot of connection there. And it's really tough working with Iran, and like it's tough situations, and I think that in the crypto space, early days, there was a really huge drive to build something better than governments. And that sector of crypto has actually grown. It doesn't seem like it narrative wise, because the narrative has grown in other directions in a much faster pace. But like in 2013, it felt like the main narrative in crypto was we can build something better than governments. Now that's a smaller like percentage of the crypto narrative. But like if you look at meetups of people talking about that in 2013, it was like 5 people going to a meetup and be like, yeah, we can do better than governments. And now it's like hundreds of people, full on conferences, and that are just focused on that topic. But because the number go up crowd is so loud and so big, it's almost like they don't exist, even though the growth in that space is huge. And I feel like, at least in the crypto anarchist space, the drive is really strong because people feel like, it's not just about building a project that will maybe make you money. It's about changing the world. And when you get passionate people that really believe that they have a solution for some huge problem that really impacts their lives, like, for instance, building something better than governments for the Iranian people, or building something that can, when you have a revolution, you don't just replace one government with another, but you replace government with something better, like that's all coordination. It's not something we talk about in the public good space very much, but from my angle, that is what it's about.
Being deeply networked, being across many different projects, having a passion for change, delegating, and there was a fourth thing. It was at the beginning of what you said. That was persistence. Yeah, I feel that. We should do like a meta episode about this, like all the best 0 to 1 builders and founders. What are their secrets? But maybe that'll be a little bit of a teaser for that episode. What are the attributes that people like you and Griff, or you and Amin and other 0 to 1 builders, I put like Austin Griffith in that category, I'll share.
One thing I think that sets Amin apart from like me and Austin, for instance, is he's a better fundraiser. I feel like that's been my biggest mistake, is like, I just don't do the fundraising game, and I'm trying to work on it, honestly, because it seems like the biggest issue, but that's holding all of my projects back. And I think that's really critical too, is making sure that you're fully resourced in all dimensions.
I can see that. I mean, I think that one of the things that you pointed out to me that I thought was really interesting is this idea that there's $10 trillion of capital that goes to public goods. I think that this is a number that you put in my brain, and it's just like if you add up all the government budgets and NGOs and nonprofits just in North America, you get to a number close to 10 trillion. And what would it take if just for 0.01% of that to go to Web3? If we believe that Web3 is a better substrate for human coordination, we can build networked coordination games. What would it take to start routing some of that money away from these high administrative overhead, hierarchical NGOs, and deploy them in a more networked way? And so, it's funny to hear you reflect on the fact that you don't perceive yourself as a good fundraiser, but you really opened my eyes to the fact that there's lots of capital that's going towards public goods. It's just not effectively routed. So if we can cross that chasm, I think that there's a lot of upside. But there's probably more crypto native ways to bootstrap these tools until we get to an escape velocity where they're even legitimate enough for an NGO or a government to use. But just knowing that there's something on the other side of that chasm for me was a really exciting moment. You're the one who opened my eyes to that.
Yeah, and I really do think that's the best direction for the crypto anarchist space is, which is for me the public good space. But it is really this actually not saying governments are bad, but saying that we can do something better than governments, and not trying to overthrow them or have a revolution, but augment them, solve problems they don't want to solve, and in a better way than they can, right? Like I'm in Costa Rica, and before the call we were talking like, how remote it is. Like you can probably hear the birds, and I'm literally just looking at cows. There's no paved roads around here. It's all dirt roads that are destroying all the cars, and there's really no good way for the people who live here to coordinate around building the roads. Governments usually build roads, and if they don't care about you, then they're not going to build roads for you, at least in America. There is clear value to unlock there, because our car gets it needs a mechanic to do some kind of overhaul every 6 months, because it's like, it's just going over these rocks, and it's like these cars are not made for dirt roads all the time. If we could paint these roads, like it would solve a lot of problems, and it would create value. But how do we coordinate around this? And Web3 is not ready yet. The UX is horrible for coordination. Like I feel like it's something that Pairwise and other cool voting strategies like Prop House is a really nice one. All the cool stuff that you have on your supermodular.xyz/coordination, is that what it is?
Yeah, supermodular.xyz/coordination-mechanisms, but you can just get it from the nav at supermodular.xyz. So last episode that you and I did together it was a tour of 50 different coordination mechanisms, and people were so inspired by that episode and the sort of taxonomy that we put together that we came up with a visual taxonomy of different coordination mechanisms, and you can check it out at supermodular.xyz. So it's a fun way that our work has just sort of ricocheted off of each other in fun ways. So that's one of the many ways I think that our work has ricocheted off of each other. Of course, Giveth and Gicoin working together is another, and I'm sure there'll be more in the future. But yeah, it's a good shill for sure. I'll put that in the show notes.
Yeah, and I do. I mean, I got to give you so much credit, because I think quadratic funding is by far the most ready to be consumed mechanism that's out there that can really make a change on the ground, and already has, like in Denver, right?
Well, don't give me too much credit, because I'm just the meme lord that's camping on top of the idea space that Vitalik and Glenn and Zoe, they're the authors of the quadratic funding paper. But happy to be standing on the shoulders of giants, and hopefully deploying more quadratic funding in more places over the next several years is what we'll see. And but yeah, I think that there's going to be a plurality of mechanisms that fund public goods and create digital democracy, and I think that we should embrace the ways they complement each other for sure.
Yeah, and I really think that donations and taxes, which are the dominant ways of funding public goods in our day-to-day lives, like in meat space, in the digital space, creating a token honestly funds a lot of public goods. But in meat space, it's taxes based. Government's job is to fill in, to create value in the non-excludable space. That's how I see it. Public goods or non-excludable goods that don't have a business model, because there's no customers. Everyone is the customer, and there's like supposedly a tragedy of the commons. This is where governments can use taxes as a funding mechanism to then build the roads, or do environmental regulations, provide identity cards, all of these things that we take for granted that are free. They're common pool resources or public goods. They're effectively non-excludable value, or normally not excluded value. There are, of course, use case situations where governments exclude people, but for the most part, they're really providing benefit to society at large. Taxes are the dominant form of public goods funding. And you give the stat of $10 trillion. So that's the US. And actually I have the updated stat from the World Bank, and the stat doesn't exist really. It was something we had to look up for every country and then aggregate it. They're taxing $25 trillion across the world in taxes are collected and spent on public goods per year. That's 2021. But also in 2021, that's how much taxes were collected. But then actually $35 trillion were spent because, of course, they also print money and go into debt, right, every year. So governments, and I can give you an Excel spreadsheet that has every country cited for this. But governments actually are spending $35 trillion every year on funding public goods, and they're literally just burning it. I mean, they kind of have this taxation model, and they can print their own money and play these games. But in the end, they take money, create value, and get nothing in return. The cycle kind of ends. Whereas in the business model world, in the excludable goods world, if you have a movie theater, you're selling tickets, you get a little bit profit that you can reinvest to make the movie theater better. If you're providing a movie in the park that everyone gets to enjoy for free, you put up the donation box and you hope to get some funds so that the guy bringing the projector can get a new bulb when it goes out. And so, the taxation game, the donation game really are these dead ends. And what I've seen is that this public goods Lego approach, where we can bring in the economic games that crypto is really good at, like Bitcoin is providing a lot of value. And it's not using donations or taxes. It's just issuing a currency and creating demand for that currency. That primitive is by far the most successful, ingenious primitive that the crypto space has created, and it doesn't even take credit for it. It's very poorly documented. But this concept that, you issue a currency, you use that currency to reward the contributors, the people creating value. So you don't need a business model because you're rewarding people with tokens that you aren't collecting, you're literally just minting. And then within the network of value production, there is some sort of demand for that token that can create a market for public goods. And the market for public goods creators is, I think, going to be the biggest innovation of crypto. And you see it with NFTs, where they're just printing an NFT, selling it, minting it, and then they try to add utility to it. Or governance tokens, or of course blockchain tokens, where it's like, oh, you need a little bit for gas, but then you get this network of value. And I'm excited for an easy way to start these things up, because the problem with economic models is that you need liquidity, you need accurate price discovery for there to be market feedback, and that market feedback is critical for these free markets to really work. And if you have a startup and you have a low liquidity token, if no one wants to buy it, like NFTs, the price is effectively zero, and that's not the accurate price. And so you don't have this like nice feedback mechanism. Whereas if we can create systems where it's easy to start up a purpose-driven economy, an economy where you're issuing a token, rewarding people creating value and creating demand for that token, if there was a cool, easy way to start that up, then thousands, millions of experiments could start up, like effectively the LLC or the startup roadmap, that so many people do in the tech space. If we can model that same thing in the economic landscape as opposed to the revenue business model landscape, oh man, the innovation will be crazy. And I am wearing the Common Stack shirt. So our solution for this is the augmented bonding curve, which provides price discovery and liquidity for low liquidity markets. And our first pilot was the Token Engineering Commons token and the Token Engineering Commons community, which is now one of the featured rounds with the Allo protocol for Gicoin. So it's super cool to see them, the public goods Legos really happening. But it's cool because normally for most quadratic funding matching pools, someone is donating into that pool, right? Well, for the Token Engineering Commons, the $25,000 was actually came from an investment in the token engineering field and advancing the token engineering field as a public good. And people bought TEC tokens. And with the purchase of those TEC tokens, that money went into a pool where the TEC token holders can vote. And they chose to allocate $25K into the Allo protocol and be part of this the beta round for Gicoin this round. And that means that 25K isn't actually a donation. It's actually part of the economic system working. That's super cool. And if we can start moving that model out of the digital space and advancing nerdy things like token engineering and making it easy for someone who's building the roads here to have a startup to coordinate who wants a road built where, who wants this pothole fixed, who wants these things fixed. Okay, well, you have to invest in my startup to get me to fix that. Oh, and also there's a reputation system where every landowner here also has some voting power, and we can kind of marry the plutocracy with the with like a reputation system that's not plutocratic, so that we can actually, you know, decide public goods in a better way. Man, I'm just ranting. Do you have anything before I start changing another topic? Do you want to interject?
Yeah, no, I'm preach. I'm in the audience, like passing a lighter back and forth or waving a lighter, like preach, Griff, keep going.
Well, one of the things that I think we forget is YouTube is a public good. Twitter is a public good. Facebook, all of these, or in your case, what you like to call it, is a network good. And these network goods, which is like, I wish I could get the term non-excludable good as a thing, because I think network good and all these things could kind of fall under that umbrella. But they have great business models that are providing public goods. And my favorite one is honestly just the freemium model. You provide the public good, everyone gets to enjoy some level of service for free. But if you're a donor or an investor, really, if you're an investor in this public goods service, then you get Twitter Blue for free, you know, and your tweets get a little bit higher visibility. And, you know, you might have some kind of control over the voting algorithm on Twitter, like, sorry, the Twitter algo. You know, you might have some, you know, we can start decentralizing these things, and we can do a mix of reputation and monetary contributions and labor contributions and expertise and just being a participant in the game, and kind of take all of that signaling and actually create the same business models that are working in the tech community now, where they're providing public goods to society, but start applying them to meet space, right? And also take away the need for revenue and make it focused on economic systems, make it focused on liquidity and token price and growth, right? Especially if you have a small startup. Because and why I think this is so important is because we need competition in the public goods space. Right now, governments have a monopoly over every public goods vertical that they choose to control. There's one road builder in town, and that's the government. Okay, if you're not going to compete with them if you start a startup saying, "Hey, invest in my road building startup." So really, we'll need to start these things, and governments will be the first customer. They have to be, because they have a monopoly. But do they really want to fix the roads? That's my question. I don't think they do. I think that if we could make the sell to the local community council here that said, listen, instead of paying for the next 2 years of road construction, invest in our startup and participate with the community. We're going to use quadratic funding to crowdfund which projects should be solved in the community this 6 months, and prioritize a list with Pairwise or quadratic funding, or however we want to do it, quadratic voting as well. We can use multiple coordination games to create a to-do list for the next 6 months. And the local city council could invest in one economy that's taking one strategy that's focused on businesses, and maybe there's another road building startup that's like, actually, we're focused on homeowners, and that's our chosen audience. And they can both be competing to provide public services. And that's where the magic is. If we can have a free market for public goods, like we have a free market-ish for private goods, then, man, what a crazy world we would have. And there would be a lot of opportunity also to start funding things that don't get funding now, because the current market dynamics are that you make a profit by externalizing costs, externalizing risk. So like the meta crisis and all these things, AI existential risk is a huge topic right now because there's no real way to address it. What do we do? Why every AI startups incentivizes, as Daniel Schwarzenberger very well pointed out on your podcast, which if people haven't listened to that, like go watch Daniel Schwarzenberger's podcasts with you. They're amazing. The companies have a perverse incentive to move fast and break things and externalize the external risk, the existential risk, because and externalize the cost of mitigating existential risk because, well, they have investors and first to market moves, is very important. So if somehow we could create competing economies that are trying to address existential risk, and the ones that succeed, people who invest in those economies would actually, if they invested early, they'd make a huge profit. And if they could start to mitigate this existential risk and make money by doing it, then all of a sudden existential risk effectively can have a number on a spreadsheet that can be competing with the profitability of getting AI out there. That's what really excites me, is this ability to get the value of public goods in a spreadsheet so that it's comprehensible by the shareholders that have a fiduciary duty to externalize cost, pollute, create existential risk, because that's just not on a spreadsheet yet. But if there's another group that's saying, no, that has value and we can quantify it, and now we're going to put it's on your spreadsheet, you have to manage it, or you have an opportunity to make a profit by mitigating existential risk because we'll collaborate around it. Yeah, I think that's a huge opportunity. Thanks for letting me rant. I kind of just went on like 6 tangents.
Well, first off, your passion clearly comes through when hearing you talk about this. And, as you're sort of taking different paths into discussing the problem space here, I was kind of thinking about how I've been beginning to think about regen Web3 and the meta crisis and public goods as this, it's a hyper object, right? So it's an object that has a sort of like critical importance to it, but you can't touch it. Something like climate change is a hyper object because you can view it from a bunch of different angles, and it's just this like abstract thing. And so the angles that I heard coming from you are, hey, there's trillions of dollars of capital that's supposed to be being put on, deployed to the public good, but it's being deployed in an opaque, unaccountable, inefficient, and often centralized way. And what if we could build a more transparent, programmable, permissionless, pluralistic way of solving public goods and then route some of the capital over there? I heard bottoms up local regeneration using a pluralism of mechanisms of deployment of that capital. I heard giving public goods a business model in there and helping things get bootstrapped off the ground. And then, I think that like where it nets out for people is better funding to causes citizens actually care about. If I'm an everyday citizen, then I can be incentivized to, if this vision comes to pass, I can be incentivized to pay down existential risk and to work for the public good and not just to work for only things that I can capture. So that's me restating that, hey, this is a hyper object, and that's 4 different angles of how I look at the hyper object. And you were just kind of crisscrossing in and out would be my somewhat reductionist summary of what you said. So I know it's just neat to hear your passion come through, and I can feel that you truly believe that you're at a high leverage point in which we can create some systemic change, and I feel that too. It's the reason why I do this podcast. So it's neat to hear it in your words.
Yeah, thanks, man. And just to bring it back to pairwise and voting signaling, like we got to make it easy for people on the ground to actually give a signal, and voting every 4 years or every 2 years or whenever they do, participating in civic society in whatever means that they can. It's really not it's really inefficient, and I don't think snapshot voting is going to replace it. So I think there's a lot of opportunity for innovation way beyond pairwise. Like I want to see the people who are designing the algorithms behind what advertisement gets shown on Amazon to me. I want to see those people be developing community signaling tools, because like how much energy and like thought went into which advertisement am I going to show this user based off of their, patterns that they were using online, right? What if we could have our own AI bot on our own Dappnode that is, reading all of the transcripts of video calls and messages on different platforms. And of course, you own that data. And then it participates for the signaling opportunities that you have as a person who is in Costa Rica, and collecting the opportunities to be part of the various communities and just kind of guesses at what you would want. And you can train it. You see an email every week and you're like, no, wait, not that one. Change that vote, change this vote. But the rest of these 7 are great. So how do we make the user experience of expressing your opinion on issues that impact you, things that are relevant to you, very easy? And how do we make it so that if you really don't have an opinion, you just turn those off because you don't care? So many people are single issue voters. Why do we have to elect one representative that is supposed to, pander to all of these? There's no one good representative for each person. You're the best representative for you. We have to make it easy for your signal to be expressed, aggregated, and for the direction of your local communities to go that way. That will be the big unlock.
I feel like there's a huge opportunity here where we get higher resolution map of constituent preferences, which means better collective resource allocation to the causes citizens actually care about. And then it creates this reflexive loop that's this virtuous cycle where it's like, oh, I'm going to participate more in the democratic process because now, there's the ROI for me to do it. And that creates a reflexive, okay, now we have even higher resolution to our digital democracy and better collective resource, and the loop repeats there. And so that's kind of like, it's very reductionist, but that's what I view a lot of my work and your work and other people who are working on public goods, the ultimate loop that I think that we're going to create.
10,000%, 10,000%. Way more concise than my rants.
So one of the things this is actually the first time I talked about it on the podcast, but I'll talk about it now. So the GreenPilled V2 book, I'm increasingly thinking that it's not going to be like bigger and crazier theories, but like abstract ideas. I really want to go super ground level and practical with it. And so I think that we're going to publish a series of books about local regeneration toolkits. So basically, it'll be a series of books, all called like Green Pill, How to Regenerate Your Local Community. And the first will be how to set a social selling point, how to, start a meetup, how to get people excited about your the ideas. And then the second, and these will be like small little pamphlets. They won't even be like full books. So the first one will be setting social selling points. And then the next one will be how to run QF in your local community. And then, maybe we could invite everyone who's working on a crypto economic way of coordinating the commons to write a chapter or like a sub booklet about this. And so we'll do retroactive public goods funding, and I'll invite Coordinate to do one. And so this is my invitation to you to write one about Pairwise, and we can do one on Giveth and Givebacks and everything like that. But actually giving people the tools to regenerate their local communities, I think that we're on the precipice of actually being able to make it happen. And so I want to go way practical with it is I think what I'm trying to broadcast here, and also invite you and Giveth to author a chapter or a pamphlet or something to it. So aiming to launch it in the next 9 months, maybe by December 2024. So maybe you and I can release that together. And I'll author the QF chapter, you author the Pairwise and token bonding curve chapters, and we'll just go super practical with it, and hopefully let 1,000 experiments blossom in all of these local communities to allocate resources better.
Absolutely. And I already see it working with the beta round. I saw GreenPilled Germany raising funds there, and I also saw all these refi DAO local nodes, like all San Jose, Medellin, Mexico City. Like refi DAO is doing an incredible job bringing communities together that are interested in the refi space, especially focused on environmental impact. And I can't agree more with this. Like, I would say I feel like crypto right now is very focused on like the cause space and being global, but it needs that local hit too. It's a great 1-2 punch where you can have these network of networks overlaying on top of each other.
The network of networks, yeah. And one of the things I really value is just the pluralism of, if we were in Web 2, I feel like Giveth and Gitcoin would be like elbowing each other out for market share, but you only get what you give is the meme that I feel like between Giveth and Gitcoin. So very, very fun to be building this movement with a pluralism of voices and pluralism of mechanisms and pluralism of funding approaches. And that's what's going to make diversity of principles value of it and make it anti-fragile too. So always appreciate having you on in our discussions, Griff, and we will co-evolve in the infinite garden together.
Absolutely, man. I love working with you in any way that we can. And really the whole I feel like the public good space in crypto is so lovey-dovey. It's so nice to be in that cooperation mode as opposed to competition mode. I don't know how.
And this is the bear market. Imagine what we'll be like in the bull market.
Exactly. Well, cool, man. Thank you so much for having me on. It was really fun.
Yeah, totally. Hard to one up the last episode that we did together, which I thought was pretty foundational, but really excited about Pairwise, excited about the work that you're doing. So call to action for the listener, follow Griff on Twitter. There'll be a link in the show notes. Check out pairwise.generalmagic.io. Any other call to actions for people before we wrap, Griff?
Donate to your favorite projects on Gitcoin. If this goes out in time and it's still open, don't miss the beta round, man. It's I love, it's not even about the donations. I love discovering new projects. That is the coolest thing. The Meta Crisis round is full of gems, man. That round, just shelling point of quadratic funding is incredible. And if there's a round that is interesting to you, the token engineering round or the Meta Crisis round, I can really recommend. So many cool projects. Get out there and donate and vote effectively. There's almost nearly $2 million being distributed to whichever projects you vote on. So you donate to. That's pretty amazing.
Don't tell them that it's a governance experiment, Griff. Governance feels like work. Donating in an e-commerce experience feels like something you do all the time. So you're leaking it. You're leaking the alpha.
Exactly.
Thanks again for doing this. Excited to see where Pairwise goes, and keep up the great work, Griff.
Thanks, Kevin.
Peace and love.